Chapter 3. The next morning, Macha woke early in the high-built bower where she slept with her foster sisters, and she lay a few moments while sleep drifted away. But wakefulness came quickly in the bright light and the high, cool air, and with it the clear memory of the man who had preached the night before. Thinking of him, she could no longer lie in peace, anxious lest he might be gone with the breaking day, before she had seen him again. Finola had told her that he and his friends would not be staying in the household, having put into the river mouth only to beg food and water and rest before going on further north to the kingdom of Ullida, where the man Patrick had friends from the days of his captivity and where he planned to start his mission. Dawn was not long past when she crept out of the sleeping place, and the light was still only on the hilltops, the low sun a bright path on the gray early calm of the sea. No one was yet about save the guards, and the frail threads of the turf smoke from the damped-down fires rose straight into the windless air. On the small, narrow path from the well, Bennett came up beside her like a shadow. He looked pale and tired, as if he had not slept. "You are early, Macha, my sister, and you." They looked at each other in still, cool light, and both knew why they were about at this hour, both of them caught and held by the strange fascination of the man from the sea. But they were shy as yet of what they felt and unwilling to put it into words. In silence they walked a little through the paths of the dun, and although neither of them would speak of it, both pairs of eyes were on the thatched roof of the guest house on the lower slope of the dun, behind the grass-grown walls of its own small rath. Macha's feet trailed slowly to a halt. At last she turned her quiet, puzzled face to the boy beside her, and she looked far from the tempestuous girl who had danced so gaily in the edges of the sea. Did you think he spoke the truth, Bennett?" she asked urgently. A small wind was rising to bother the still morning. The smoke threads flickered and the air was cold on her hands. "Did you think he spoke the truth? The one with a day's head? Have we really not known the true God, but wandered in darkness, as he said, led into false worship by the Druids?" She was desperately confused, unable to sort out in her mind the things the man had said, and the spell and fascination of the Roman himself, with his apologetic smile and his clear, compelling voice. "He's very handsome," she said suddenly. Bennett left this and answered her question. "I believe he spoke the truth," he said, and again his boy's face looked older than its years, but this time set in serenity and content. The girl watched him curiously, knowing him to be as spellbound by Patrick as she was herself, but she had the feeling that the boy understood more, even though he was younger. "I believe," he said again, "and the Druids know he tells the truth, and they are frightened. A day's head will come, they said. Now a day's head is here. The prophecy is fulfilled, and we are part of it." He spoke the last words as if to himself, and fascinated, they stood together and stared down at the guest house roof as if they might learn something of the mystery simply by knowing that Patrick lay beneath it. Here and there the first people began to come from the huts and dwellings about the business of the day, moving over the long green slopes of the dun. With the rekindling of fires, the turf smell drifted sharp and sweet along the wind, and far below them the cattle threaded their way out to the pastures from the safety of their pens. Bennett took her hand. "We'll go down to the guest house. It's just possible we may be able to see him even if we cannot speak." His voice was urgent, as though even this much was desperately necessary to him. Inside the gates, the household of the priests was all astir, but they moved about the tasks of early day in silence, stepping carefully and glancing around at any noise. As the boy and girl pushed open the high wooden gates in the grass-grown wall, the big man who had lifted Patrick from the boat rushed forward and held his finger to his lips, urging them to quietness. "This is no time to come here," he hissed at them. "Our father rests, and we must wake him soon for prime. Leave him in peace." Macha would have turned and gone, but Bennett moved purposely around the big man as though he knew he need not heed him. "We will not disturb the father," he said. "Oh, why does he sleep here? The girl followed him with a doubtful look at the protesting giant and then stepped as he had done to stare in surprise. Around the circular dwelling where he housed his guests, Sensen had created a small garden so that they might walk in peace and shelter in the shade of trees and take their ease above the sea. Here on the young grass, the Roman lay asleep. About him, the members of his household in their white robes looked in anger and indignation at the two young people and gestured them to silence. "But why here?" whispered Macha, and gazed at him with sudden compassion, a tired man with his hair awry and no flashing blade of prophecy around his brow. "He was up long since," the man said beside her. "Up long since," and his master said, "but our voyage was tedious and he is still tired. When he sat here a moment, sleep took him again." Bennett stood there on the grass in silence as though he were alone, his rapt eyes never leaving the brown sleeping face. Suddenly he stirred, and bending to the fragrant beds, he picked fistfuls of the sweet-smelling primroses and violets and the wild blue tangle of forget-me-nots. Pushing his way between the watching men, he fell to his knees and laid them gently on the breast of the sleeping Patrick. "Foolish child, come away. Leave him in peace, boy. Go away, child." Their angry scolding did what Bennett's gentle gesture had failed to do. Patrick's eyes opened and looked up at the group around him. The young boy kneeling with his eyes fixed on his and the torn fragments of flowers still between his fingers, the angry faces of his followers, and the nervous girl waiting for him to be as furious as all the other men. But the priest only smiled his odd, diffident smile and sat up, gathering the flowers into his hands. He looked long and steadily, then at the boy, who had never taken his eyes off his. "Trouble him not," he said, then incomprehensibly, and the men about him stared at the boy. "Trouble him not, for he shall be the heir to my kingdom." And the men listened and did not understand, and Patrick and the boy looked at each other long and quietly, but only Patrick looked into the future, to Bennett's own bishopric, when he would indeed inherit his new master's kingdom. Macha was as puzzled as all the men. What did he mean by all that? She asked Bennett irritably, as later in the day they walked again for a while beside the sea. It had been difficult to get him by himself, for now he clung to Patrick like a shadow. What did he mean? "The future will tell," Bennett answered equably. "The future will tell. I only know now that I will follow him wherever he goes. He will be my life and the God he teaches." "And your parents?" she asked jealously. "They are willing, especially my father." Macha's brows drew down. She felt confused and cheated, having still got all in the world that she had yesterday, but doubtful suddenly whether it was of any real value, since she had listened to this calm, compelling voice that told her of a new God and a new world. Bennett's serene face added to her irritation, for it seemed as if he had settled all the doubts he had spoken of the day before. And for her, doubt had only just begun, nor did she understand it. She said so, kicking at the sand with a restless foot. "I don't understand," she cried furiously. "I don't understand. Yesterday you said your future was like a cloud with nothing in it, but today suddenly you know everything and are content. Does it all lie in one man?" The boy turned and looked at her and gave a small shrug as if he could not hope to explain. "It all lies in one man," he agreed, "and in one God. Today the cloud is cleared and I have a future." "And I have not," she cried despairingly. "I have not. He has come in this day's head and given you a future, but he has taken mine away. Why did he not stay where he was? We were well enough without him. Yesterday I was happy." She stamped with fury, forgetting where she was, and under her angry feet the wet sand slid away and toppled her so that she sat down and stayed there, with her head upon her knees, weeping angrily in the cold sea. Bennett watched a moment helplessly, and then he turned and left her, going back to Patrick.